Honorable Chirange.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, and welcome back from the recess. Mr. Speaker, sir, petition to the Senate concerning mistreatment, harassment, property laws, and human rights violation meted on the family of the former Tindred Member of Parliament, late Honorable Jean Marie Seroney. Mr. Speaker, sir, want to draw the following attention of the Senate to the following. That Jean Marie Seroney was a member of Legislative Council for Nandi or Legico, that is known, constituency from 1961 to 1963, and Nandi North in 1963-1966, and later the first member of Tindred constituency in 1966-1975. That, Mr. Speaker, sir, that Honorable Jean Marie Seroney was elected the Deputy Speaker for Parliament of Kenya in 1975. That during his tenure, he advocated against abuse of power, condemned corruption, and fair distribution of resources and land injustices across the country. That, Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Seroney helped champion social justice, rule of law, and democracy through much of the early independent years of Kenya. His ideas of devolution, which he kept active through much of the 60s and 70s, are now part of Constitution 2010. Mr. Speaker, sir, Seroney was arrested within the prisons of Parliament and detained for 3 years and 2 months in harsh prison conditions without trial at the famous Manyani GK prison and later to Committee prison. Mr. Speaker, sir, that he was then released in December 11, 1978, and stayed at home where he faced a series of opposition from leaders and aspirants. That in the year Honorable Jean Marie Seroney, as is known GM Seroney, in the year 1981, he was appointed as the chairperson of Industrial Development of Bank, that is IDP, which is served until his death on 6th December 1982. Mr. Speaker, sir, that his farming venture deteriorated significantly, and Honorable Seroney was unable to service his huge loan that he took from the Standard Chartered Bank and National Bank of Kenya to finance the acquisition since he was in detention. Mr. Speaker, sir, the petition to the Senate, therefore, that he desperately tried to seek the help of the government of Kenya to at least waive off his interest for the time he was in detention on 3 years and 2 months, that he had not been tried and found guilty of any offense. His pleas fell on deaf ears, leading him deep into a state of depression. Mr. Speaker, sir, that Jean Marie Seroney, Honorable, after his death, almost all his land and property was sold and others grabbed, leaving his family desperate, thus becoming squatters. And even his grave has also been grabbed. That, Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Jean Marie Seroney, they have made best efforts to these matters addressed by relevant authorities, of which have failed to give satisfactory response. Mr. Speaker, sir, that none of these issues raised in this petition are pending in any court of law, constitutional, or any other legal body. Wherefore, we humble petition prays that the Senate, 1, investigates the circumstances that led to unlawful arrest and detention without trial of the late Honorable Jean Marie Seroney without trial and without any offense. Mr. Speaker, sir, second prayer, make appropriate recommendations to have the family of the late Honorable Jean Marie Seroney be compensated. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, sir, prayer, investigate the reasons that led to non-adherence to the various court orders issued to the family concerning disputes on property belonging to the late Honorable Jean Marie Seroney. Mr. Speaker, sir, and finally, consider recognizing the late Honorable Jean Marie Seroney as a national hero through the requisite mechanisms. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honorable Senators, I've got another petition to present. Thereafter, we will make comments. I'll invite comments on the two petitions within the available 30 minutes meant for petitions. Honorable Senators, I hereby report that a petition has been submitted to the Senate by Mr. Charles Waikwa and others concerning the gazettement of land reference 12493 situated west of Rumuruti Township in Laikipia County. As you're aware, under Article 119(1) of the Constitution, and I quote, "Every person has a right to petition Parliament to consider any matter within its authority, including enacting, amending, or repealing any legislation." Honorable Senators, the salient issues raised in the said petition are as follows: that the petitioners are residents of Laikipia West constituency and owners of land reference number 12493, measuring approximately 370 acres, situated west of Rumuruti Township in Laikipia West constituency, Laikipia County. That the Kenya Forest Service approached Mr. Kinga Wamwendia, the owner of parcel of land reference number 2467/1, with a view to acquire the land for expansion of Lariak Forest, and offered to compensate him with an alternative parcel of land from Rumuruti Forest, Laikipia County. That in the year 1980, Mr. Mwendia surrendered the original title documents in respect of land reference 2467/1 to the Kenya Forest Service, which was transferred to the government and gazetted as forest land. That a grant was thereon issued to on freehold basis by the Commissioner of Lands to Mr. Mwendia for parcel of land reference number 12493, which was to be degazetted as forest land. That land reference number 12493 has since been subdivided into many smaller parcels of land and transferred multiple times over the last 43 years, and that the Ministry of Lands has always processed the transfers and issued title deeds thereon on freehold basis to the transferees. That the agricultural activities taking place on parcel of land reference number 12493 have been the economic lifestay of the area, and the county government of Laikipia generates substantial revenue from taxes collected on farm produce being delivered to markets from the area. That the Kenya Forest Service has failed to formally degazette parcel of land reference number 12493, contrary to the agreement with Mr. Mwendwa, and this failure has resulted has a resultant effect on the area being underdeveloped by the county government in terms of infrastructure and social amenities, and that the county government has never considered this area whenever national and county government plans are being prepared and budgets thereon allocated. That the petitioners have made efforts to address the matter by relevant authorities, all of which have failed to yield the desired outcome. The petitioners, therefore, pray that the Senate, through the relevant committee, investigates the matter with a view to fast-track the degazettement of parcel of land reference number 12493, situated west of Rumuruti Township in Laikipia County, and two, intervenes in the manner to ensure that county government of Laikipia includes this area in its annual development plans and allocate budgets for establishment of social amenities, construction, grading, and maintenance of infrastructure projects for equality and inclusivity. Honorable Senators, pursuant to Standing Order 237, I shall now allow comments, observations, and clarifications in relation to this petition, together with the petition that has just been read out by the Honorable Senator Seroney, all combined for a period of 30 minutes. Senator Osotsi, you're the only one on the... Yeah, it's now working. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is a problem with the system. That's why I had to use the interruption. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important petition. And you remember last week, I presented a statement in this House on a similar matter that is affecting my county, Vihiga County. a situation where government acquired land through compulsory acquisition from landowners, private landowners, and relocated them to a forest, a place called Shiru Shabiringa Settlement Scheme, which is within the larger Kakamega forest. These people have been there for over 35 years without titles. They can't access amenities like roads, hospitals, and the government has kept on promising that they are going to resolve the problem. Mr. Speaker, a lot of petitions have been made to this House for the government to resolve this issue so that they degazette that part of the forest for settlement. That has not been done. So I presented a statement which I hope the committee, relevant committee, will look at this matter in totality, not just Laikipia, but Vihiga and many other places where government acquired land from private owners, and then it has refused to gazette the forest where they were taken to. This is a serious issue, Mr. Speaker, and I hope the committee will move with speed to look at all similar matters of this nature and provide a report to this House as soon as possible. And Mr. Speaker, we must also interrogate the performance of Kenya Forest Service on matters to do with the degazettement of forests. They have been very slow, they have been very bureaucratic, and I hope the committee will also invite Kenya Forest Service to shed light into the issue of degazettement as far as comparison or acquisition of private land is concerned. Mr. Speaker, I support this petition.
Senator Cheriot Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I join the rest of my colleague and those who will speak after in perhaps sharing a thought or two on these two petitions that have been presented. I'll begin with the later than the former after that, Mr. Speaker. This is the second petition in the last 2 weeks that that is being brought before this House, Mr. Speaker, with regards to land acquired by the government forcefully, Mr. Speaker, and the subsequent mistreatment of members of the public who otherwise were going about their duties, were not bothered with selling that particular land, but because government had need or for strategic reasons to the community, decided to acquire the land. Mr. Speaker, about 5 years ago, we passed the land valuation bill in this House and provided the procedures upon which government can acquire land, Mr. Speaker, from members of the public and the procedures that needs to be followed. Laws that we debated for many hours in this House, Mr. Speaker. In fact, if my memory serves me right, we stayed up to deep into the night because there were many regulations that members felt we needed to include so that we protect the citizens, because the basis of argument at that particular time, Mr. Speaker, was between the government and the people, who deserves protection from each other. And while it was found that on many occasions, this is based on the experience from how people had manipulated land records, Mr. Speaker, especially key people in government who knew where strategic investment, big projects were about to be churned out in a particular part of the country, they'd quickly buy land and sell to government at an exorbitant price, Mr. Speaker. Then we found that there was need to, while securing the interest of Kenyans generally, because government at the end of the day is all of us as a people, but still also protect the rights of the property owners, because the right to own property, Mr. Speaker, is a constitutional right, which we felt if you're providing for the legal mechanism of how the same can be withdrawn, Mr. Speaker, then it must be properly guided so that citizens can enjoy their rights to the full, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, we did a bill in this House, Mr. Speaker, one afternoon that we hoped would have ensured that we never get to see the kind of petitions as one that was presented last week, I think with regards to Vihiga County, and this one of today, Mr. Speaker, from Laikipia. It is my sincere hope that when the Committee of Lands retreats, Mr. Speaker, to consider this particular issue, they will come back to this House with a report whether is it for want of good laws that we are seeing many of these cases, Mr. Speaker? Because I believe this is not the only problem that we have. These two cases are not the only ones in the country. Or is it that officers, either Ministry of Lands or Kenya Forest Service or any state agencies, Mr. Speaker, are doing this in total disregard to the rule of law, Mr. Speaker? Because if that were to be the case, then we need to sanction those officers so that we protect citizens and we don't end up having citizens frustrated, Mr. Speaker. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, just by way of closing, is on the very sad story of the great Jean-Marie Seroney. If you're a historian, Mr. Speaker, of parliamentary practice in Kenya, you cannot miss the chapter. And Mr. Speaker, is unfortunate because previously, in the 9th, 8th, and the previous parliaments, we used to have a library, I think used to be somewhere where now that serves as a Senate lounge, Mr. Speaker, where on many afternoons you'd walk in and read about debates and contributions of greats that had worked before us in this house, Mr. Speaker. It's unfortunate that we haven't kept that culture, Mr. Speaker. And on many occasions, when members want to study or read, perhaps even if you were to put a question today, Mr. Speaker, whether any of our colleagues in the House today know where the parliamentary library is today, not one will be able to answer. Maybe Senator Omogeni knows, or he may not even be aware that it is below his office at County Hall, Mr. Speaker. That's where it has been tucked into. I know that also, Mr. Speaker, because that's where my office used to be for the last 5 years. It's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker. I hope that we can keep on the culture of celebrating men and women who made great, significant contribution. Forget about the executive, forget about the judiciary, at least us as legislators. Jean-Marie Seroney suffered because mostly of the things that he said and did while as a member of parliament. Of course, the trademark remark that is known for, the infamous one of, or the rather famous one of, you cannot substantiate the obvious, that got him into trouble, was made in this very precincts of parliament, Mr. Speaker. Yet, it is within our powers to celebrate such members who made their contribution one way or the other, but were eventually punished. There are many others, Mr. Speaker, that we can think of. We can use this as an example of either us as a parliament by recommendation, because we have the National Honors Committee, Mr. Speaker, that we can think through. I know we may not find the money to compensate his family, but there are certain things that we can do that his family will feel that at least as parliament, we appreciate the contribution of their patriarch, Mr. Speaker. This is the second time that this issue is coming before this House, Mr. Speaker, yet we haven't been able to secure anything. At least, Mr. Speaker, even for heaven's sake, secure his grave, which now we know for a fact is a playground in a primary school in Nandi, where he comes from. Maybe name the school for which his body lies in, because now it's a playground of a primary school, after him, and build a proper mausoleum, celebrate him, either through the county government, national government, on recommendation of this House, because we have the powers, Mr. Speaker. And I believe there's something that the committee can recommend. Then using the example of Jean-Marie Seroney, celebrate other greats that came to this parliament and in the course of their work as parliamentarians, because as we do our work, we rub those in the executive the wrong way sometimes. We can use that as a basis to celebrate others, so that in many years, long after we are gone, Mr. Speaker, from this earth, others can also remember the work that we did while here. That is, if we live to be great and do great things for this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mogeni.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm moved and saddened listening to the agony that has befallen the family of Jean-Marie Seroney. Mr. Speaker, it's a collective shame that as a nation, we have let the family of that great Kenyan to be subjected to the kind of suffering that I've had Senator Cherargei convey to the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, whether we like it or not, in the fullness of time, you will either be a former senator or the late senator. That's a fact, whether we like it or not. So, Mr. Speaker, when you hear such moving stories of a former great leader like Jean Marie Seroney. You move us to almost shed tears on the floor of this house. Because Jean Marie Seroney is a mentor to many of us. I used to say when I grow up, I want to be as independent-minded as Jean Marie Seroney. That is the legacy. There are people who slid through this house like a snake. You'll never have their footprints. But Jean Marie Seroney, Mr. Speaker, left a record. It is really sad listening that even his own grave is being grabbed. Mr. Speaker, that's not the way to treat heroes. If you go to Washington, you will not move 3 streets before you see a street named after one of the great Americans. You'll see Lincoln something, George Washington somewhere. But yeah, you don't see anywhere anything reminding you about Jean Marie Seroney. It is sad. It is sad. We don't want the senator leader to read about just Kenyatta and Moi. We want to read about, because some of us don't belong to the Kenyattas and the Mois. We belong to the Jean Marie Seroney generation. Yeah? Those are the guys who have inspired many of us. So what you have brought to the house is really sad. And I've really started here agonizing what is the entry point for the house to do something about this, the agony that is facing the family of Jean Marie Seroney. May God Almighty forgive us for the way we have treated that great son of this country. It is sad, Mr. Speaker, and I would not wish that to happen even to you when you exit from that seat. Mr. Speaker, for the last 1 month as chair of Members' Welfare, I've been agonizing on how to, actualize the benefit of our retired speakers. And you'll be surprised, Mr. Speaker, that one of our speakers, the respected Kenneth Marende, has written almost 10 letters to us, pleading with the state to reinstate his security. Something that is entitled by law, Mr. Speaker. You can imagine, my speaker, Mr. Speaker, sir, you retire instead of us giving you what you legally deserve, because you have occupied that seat of speaker. You start again sending correspondence to Parliamentary Service Commission to give to you what belongs to you. Not every Kenyan will ever be lucky to sit where you are sitting, Mr. Speaker. So when you retire, Mr. Speaker, you should be treated with honor. Our former speakers have never been paid their retirement packs. So they're almost in that category of the mistreatment that the family of Jean Marie Seroney is facing. And this issue, I don't know when we'll ever fix it. I don't know where the committee that will deal with this petition over unlawful arrest and detention. You know, Mr. Speaker, this, as I'm speaking, there is a police officer who has sworn an affidavit in court stating that he was, I don't know the word he used, he was harassed, threatened to effect arrest against a sitting deputy president of this country. And he just swears it, that affidavit, presents it in court, and we proceed as if nothing has happened. For a police service that in Article 244 of the Constitution is supposed to uphold the tenets of human rights and professionalism. But that guy is still serving in the police force as we speak today. Meaning that the way the late Jean Marie Seroney was unlawfully arrested and detained, the police force and our 2010 Constitution is still behaving the same way. Last week, you saw what happened to Stuart Mazayo. You are arrested, charged, your case stays for 3 days. Before you even appoint a lawyer, your case is withdrawn. It's like it's fashionable now to arrest members of parliament. Senator Cherage here was dragged to court on a Friday afternoon. The intention was to have him spend a weekend in police cells. When I visited him in Gigiri, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Senator here slept on a corridor. All night. On a corridor, Mr. Speaker. So when we get this kind of petition, it should prick our conscience. Because one day, Senator Galwale, it will be you, tomorrow it will be me. So when we get this kind of petition, Mr. Speaker, the committee that will be tasked to address this matter should go to the depths and make recommendations that can bring to an end the kind of mistreatment that we are subjecting our honorable members to. I feel sorry. On behalf of the people of Nyamira, I apologize to the family of the late Jean Marie Seroney, and I hope that as a House, we will do something to redeem ourselves. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Boni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you are sitting in the big seat of Parliament as the chair. Unknown to many young Kenyans, Jean Marie paid the price of losing everything that he had worked for because of sitting in that chair. In the history of this House, in the history of the Republic of Kenya, Jean Marie was detained because of making a ruling from the chair. Martin Shikuku had stood in his place and declared that KANU, the then ruling party, was dead. So another member then rose and asked the Speaker to ask Martin Shikuku to substantiate the allegation that KANU was dead. And Jean Marie told the member, you are out of order because one cannot substantiate the obvious. And for that reason, he was detained for 1,152 days. It is documented by Amnesty International. It's only in Amnesty International that rose to that greatness and said, we will decorate Jean Marie Seroney as a prisoner of conscience. I appeal to the counties of the region from which Jean Seroney was born and served to come together, make a collective decision. The biggest city of now and in future is Eldoret. We should name Eldoret as the Jean Marie International Airport. We will have respect to that fellow. Why? Because Nelson Mandela, Mr. Speaker, when he was president, he was told we are going to name John Smart's International Airport in Johannesburg in your name as President Mandela. Mandela refused and said, we are going to name it in the name of Oliver Tambo. That is how Oliver Tambo, a freedom fighter like Jean Marie, ended up being immortalized. We can learn from it, and as my brother, the Senator of Nyamira, has said, we can do something. Let us make a motion, lead us, Cherargei, it is your baby. We communicate it as a message to the counties' assemblies of Uasin Gishu, Nandi, name it, and then they can adopt it. We immortalized the honorable member. Even if you compensate them, it might be a few million shillings, but that money will disappear. We want this great history to be preserved for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, there is a young, I don't know his age, called Godfrey Sang. Godfrey Sang is the one who captured the greatness of this man and wrote a book. Members, let us continue reading. It's a beautiful book called Just for Today, The Lives and Times of Jean Marie Seroney. Why he called it Just for Today is because when Seroney used to stand in this house, he would speak and tell Mr. Speaker, sir, I support Just for Today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this petition just for today.
Senator Oburu Odinga.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also stand to support the petition by my brother, Honorable Cherargei from Nandi. Mr. Speaker, I knew Jean Marie Seroney personally, and he was a young, very, very astute lawyer who was representing Kenyans, not only Kenyans, but his people also very effectively in Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the law which detained Jean Marie Seroney was passed in this parliament. And when it was passed in parliament, it was the law on detention without trial. Many members spoke very passionately in support of it. One of the people who spoke very passionately in support of that law was my own dad, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. They said that this law was meant to deal with the shifter menace in northern Kenya, and that innocent Kenyans needed not fear anything about that law, because it was just meant to deal with the shifter menace. But, Mr. Speaker, before long, many of the people who spoke very passionately about it, including my own father, became the victims of the same law. Mr. Speaker, I can also tell you, Mr. Speaker, that statement which Honorable Halwale has quoted, which put Seroney in trouble, was made by Martin Shikuku. It was Martin Shikuku who said, KANU, they want to kill Parliament the same way they killed KANU. And the leader of government business in the House stood up to say that that was a very serious statement, and that Honorable Shikuku must substantiate his statement. But Seroney was sitting in the chair. He was the speaker that time. And Seroney said, one cannot be called upon to substantiate the obvious. And that statement alone put him in a lot of trouble, Mr. Speaker. In fact, they had to hold themselves in the library here in Parliament because, the laws did not allow police to come in to Parliament and arrest members. So police and the police commissioner then was called Hinga. Hinga refused to come to send police to storm Parliament to arrest them. But then finally, the authorities that be said, even if they are still in the wombs of their mother, go and remove them and take them away. And they were indeed taken away, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that same law, when my father was arrested in 1969 and was still being held in his house, under house arrest in Kisumu, one of the parliamentarians here said that we should not have two presidents. One is being guarded in Kisumu by police and another one in Gatundu. We should only have one president. So that the Jaramogi should be removed and taken to prison where he belongs. But, Mr. Speaker, the person who spoke passionately about it here in Parliament was again later, detained together with Seroney. And, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, when we make laws, let us be very careful that we don't make laws thinking that we are making them for others. The same laws that you make will also be used against you. Mr. Speaker, so when you people are ordering police to lobby tear gas at us, be very careful. Those things could be used against against you. So don't be very happy that is happening, because it is not a good thing when you are choked by the tear gas. It is not a good thing. It is poisonous. It can choke you and kill you. So this injustice which is being done to Honorable Seroney is a historical injustice. And I support that something must be done to recover or even to compensate the family on this, because this is a historical injustice by the government. Whichever government it is by the government of Kenya. And the government of Kenya has a responsibility to compensate Seroney for the sufferings and for suffering for his own idea. He was a prisoner of conscience. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Mungatana.
Mr. Speaker, I want to also add my voice on the statement sought by the Honorable Cherargei in support of that statement. Mr. Speaker, if the executive that is currently in power desires to change the status quo of this family, Mr. Speaker, they can. So I urge the committee to also look at a way of convincing the administration in power to put its political will to help this family. I'm saying this because there is a precedent, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the former President Daniel Arap Moi, when he left office, there was a house that he had stayed with here for many years in Nairobi. And Mr. Speaker, that house in the administration of Mwai Kibaki, they made a political decision to surrender it because it was like a house that was a family home. Mr. Speaker, I served under the former Vice President, Wamalwa Kijana. And Mr. Speaker, during the time when he left us, there were issues at home, and I know that under the good political will of the late His Excellency President Mwai Kibaki, again, a very decent donation was done to assist that family. Mr. Speaker, go back again, another very famous political figure, the Honorable Stanley Jindo Matiba. Mr. Speaker, again, similar to the Honorable late Jean-Marie Seroney, Mr. Speaker, he was also detained. But because of political will, again, decent compensation was done to that family. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to agree that that committee must also seek, and I believe they will get it, so that this family, Mr. Speaker, can be compensated. Mr. Speaker, it's really, really bad that a man of that great standing, Mr. Speaker, would die of depression at the age of only 55. Mr. Speaker, when you look at that history, 3.5 years in detention, and still that 1 million that he had borrowed, he was still incurring interest. And they wouldn't even waive it, Mr. Speaker, just because he was on the political wrong side. Mr. Speaker, I urge that this administration, Mr. Speaker, and I know they are listening, to also think about this family, Mr. Speaker, to do something for this family, to move away the collective shame that we are carrying as a house, because it is terrible and it is wrong. Mr. Speaker, I support. Thank you.
Senator Munyihaji Ahmed Faki.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuunga mkono ardhi hali ambayo imeletwa bungeni na Senator wa Nandi, Senator Cherargei. Mheshimiwa Spika, masaibu ambayo imeikumba familia ya mwenda zake Seroney ni mambo ya kusikitisha katika nchi yetu ya Kenya kwa sasa. Kwa sababu ni nchi ambayo tuna sheria, tuna mwongozo, lakini hatuangalii viongozi ambao wamepita katika kuhudumia nchi yetu kwa siku za nyuma. Mheshimiwa Spika, nikikukumbusha tu kwamba hapa bungeni la Senate, bunge hili na bunge lililopita, tulipitisha mswada wa kulipa kiinua mgongo madiwani ambao walikuwa wamehudumu katika zile baraza za miji na manispaa za zamani kabla kuja kwa ugatuzi. Lakini mpaka sasa imekuwa hadithi ya nenda rudi. Tutaweka pesa mwaka ujao, tutaweka pesa mwaka utakaofuata, na mpaka leo Mheshimiwa Spika hawajalipwa chochote madiwani wale, na wengi wao wanazidi kufa katika hali ya uchochole kabisa. Kwa Mheshimiwa Spika, masaibu yanayokumba familia ya hayati marehemu mwenda zake Seroney ni jambo la kusikitisha katika nchi hii yetu. Hii inaonyesha kwamba uhuru ambao ulipiganiwa, Mheshimiwa Spika, bado haujakamilika kabisa. Ikiwa kiongozi wa bunge hili wa zamani anaweza kudhalilishwa akiwa hai, na mpaka ameondoka familia zake bado zinazidi kudhalilishwa, ina maana, Mheshimiwa Spika, kwamba hatujapata uhuru kamili katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Na ningempenda kumpa moyo Senator Cherargei kwamba yeye pia amepitia masaibu fulani, lakini kwa siku za hizi karibuni amekuwa pia akijipiga kifua hapa kwamba yuko katika serikali. Lakini nataka kumkumbusha kwamba serikali zinakula watu wake. Serikali mara nyingine zinakula watu wake. Kwa hivyo fuata nyayo za hayati Seroney. Yeye alikuwa wakili kama wewe, hivi sasa amehudumu katika bunge hili kama wewe, amekuwa kiongozi katika bunge hili kuwakilisha watu wa Nandi kama wewe. Kwa hivyo tafadhali Senator Cherargei, angalia njia ambayo utakumbukwa kwa mambo mazuri, lakini sio kukumbukwa kwa kejeli unazofanya katika bunge hili. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Senator Kathuri.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I might not get advantage like I heard Senator Buru Odinga to quote all those former leaders, but I stand ready to sympathize with our former colleague, the member Jean Seroney. I think the senator for Nandi is really following his footsteps, because he also speaks his mind, especially when, I don't know, sometimes when he wakes up nicely, he speaks his mind. Other times, he gets compromised by the situation. Mr. Speaker, this great leader served the same time with leaders like Mbana and Mate. And this is the time actually they were agitating against the shifter. I remember Mbana and Mate serving the same time with Seroney. We really admire him as a Meru community because he slept in the chamber and then he woke up. Suddenly, he went to a corner of the chamber and removed his shorts to urinate in the chamber. The reason? Oh, he was asked by the speaker, what are you doing? He said, Honorable Speaker, you know where I come from. We don't go out at night because we fear shifter. So we pee in the houses, and that is what I was doing. I thought I was in my house in Meru. So the government moved very swiftly, Mr. Speaker, to correct that problem, and the government fought the shifter, and that militia was crushed. So I really stand with my colleagues to remember this great leader. Also, those who have spoken before me have not also hailed him as a former deputy speaker. That is what I heard from Honorable Cherargei. So this is my former colleague, Honorable Speaker. And I really want to remember him with the work he did. Unfortunately, as we speak, when I became the deputy speaker of the Senate, I learned there is another group of almost 10 former deputy speakers who are still agitating to get some retirement benefits, a package similar to what is given to maybe the speakers and other constitutional office holders. Still, these deputy speakers are on their streets. They are writing letters, as you put it, Commissioner Omugeni, but nobody has listened to them. This means that if this issue was sorted, even Seroney and his family could have gotten support through this package because he is a former deputy speaker. I'm not speaking on this matter because I'm serving, but let the former, not even me, the former, at least get that package so that they can be able also to get support and support their families. This really Honorable Cherargei agitated against corruption, against misuse of power by the executive, against land grabbing. And you can see at the end of the day, he suffered the same things he was struggling to rectify. Because, as you put it, his land was given out. And, Mr. Speaker, I really, as other colleagues have seen, the committee that will be able to handle this petition should even be able to visit this family visit even his grave. I'll be happy if you will invite me also to go and witness where this great leader lived. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Kenywa.
Asante Bwana Spika kunipa fursa hii. Nasimama kuunga mkono dua mbili ambazo zimesoma katika bunge hili. Bwana Spika, ya kwanza nataka kumshukuru Waikwa ambaye ameleta kuhusu shamba ambalo lililoko Rumuruti, mahali kunaitwa Kambi Simba. Ni zaidi ya ekari 370. Bwana Spika, vile ilivyotendeka ni ya kwamba mzee Mwendia ama Kenga wa Mwendia alipatia idara ya misitu shamba lake ambayo ni ukubwa wa hilo shamba, alipatiana mahali kunaitwa Rariak, Bwana Spika. Lakini baada ya kupatiana Rariak, akaambiwa tabadilishiwa apewe shamba hilo lililo Rumuruti mahali kunaitwa Kambi Simba. Bwana Spika, baada ya kupeana shamba hilo, serikali haikubadilisha na kusema ya kwamba hili limekuwa ni shamba la Bwana Kenga wa Mwendia, Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo inakuwa ni vigumu sana kwa watu ambao walinunua hilo shamba baada ya Kendi wa Mwendia kuliuza kuweza kutengenezewa barabara pale na serikali yetu ya kaunti, kwa sababu bado inasemekana ni shamba la msitu, na inajulikana wazi ya kwamba ikiwa ni msitu hauwezi ukatengeneza barabara, Bwana Spika, hatuwezi tukatengeneza shule pale, hata hatuwezi tukatengeneza hospitali ama zahanati katika sehemu hiyo. Kwa hivyo vile ambavyo ningependa kuomba Bwana Spika ni kamati ambayo itashughulikia hilo jambo. Wakati tunapoongea wakati huu ni zaidi ya miaka 43 baada ya ile jambo kutendeka, na bado wakaaji wa sehemu ile wanaendelea kusononeka, hakuna barabara, hakuna hospitali, hakuna shule. Kwa hivyo Bwana Spika, Bwana Waigwa angelipenda ya kwamba sisi kama kamati ya Seneti tushughulikie jambo hili, ndio watu wanaoishi pale kwetu Laikipia wawache kuwa na ile shida, Bwana Spika, kwa sababu serikali ilipata shamba ililotaka pale Rariak, lakini haikufanya juhudi shamba liliweze kurudi kwa Bwana Mwendia na aweze kushughulikia kadi ambavyo tunataka. Kwa hivyo hiyo ndio maombi Bwana Spika, na naomba kamati inayoshughulikia iwaze kufanya halahala Bwana Spika, ndio wakazi wa sehemu hile ya Kambi Simba na sehemu zilizoko hapo wawache kusononeka Bwana Spika. Dua la pili Bwana Spika ambalo limeletwa na Mheshimiwa Cherargei, nataka Bwana Spika, nilipokuwa nikisikiza kwa sababu na nimesoma kidogo katika historia kuhusu Seroney, Bwana Spika, nimeangalia ni kwa vile ambavyo namjua Cherargei na vile ambavyo nimesoma mambo ya Seroney, nikajua ya kwamba tunda halianguki mbali na mti ambalo umetoka, kwa sababu ushujaa wake, vile anavyoongea bila kuogopa Bwana Spika, naona kabisa hilo ndiyo jambo. Bwana Spika, hata hivi juzi nilikuwa na uoga wakati Mheshimiwa Cherargei alivyonaswa na kutiwa ndani, nikasema mambo imeanza kuwa magumu kwake. Lakini vile ambavyo tungependa kuuliza Bwana Spika, kwa sababu Seroney alifanya kazi nzuri katika serikali yetu Bwana Spika, vile ambavyo tungependa kuomba, kwa sababu familia yake wakati huu kulingana na hilo dua wanaonekana tayari mali yao yote yalinadiwa Bwana Spika, wanaendelea kuishi kwa hali ufukara Bwana Spika. Ni vizuri serikali iweze kuwafidia Bwana Spika, na baada ya kuwafidia tuangalie atawezaje kukumbukwa, kwa sababu yeye ni mtu aliyetendea serikali yetu kazi na alifanya vile alivyopaswa kutenda Bwana Spika. Kama vile Senator Mudhuri ambaye ni naibu wa Spika anasema yeye anapoketi katika kiti hicho anafanya kulingana na kadri ya kanuni za bunge Bwana Spika. Hafanyi jambo lolote akitaka kujinufaisha yeye mwenyewe. Kwa hivyo vile ambavyo tungetaka ni Seroney na familia yake waweze kuangaliwa Bwana Spika. Na ukiangalia mtu kama Cherargei Bwana Spika, kwa sababu ya ushujaa huo, hata ijapokuwa ni vizuri julikane, nimesikia senior counsel Bwana Spika akisema ya kwamba Cherargei alishikwa na serikali hii na akafungwa. Vile vile Mombasa senator wa kutoka Mombasa Bwana Spika akasema ya kwamba ati serikali inakula watoto wake. Lakini Bwana Spika, ukiangalia serikali iliyokuweko, mtu akishikwa alikuwa akishikwa Ijumaa, wanakaa siku 3 Bwana Spika. Lakini kiongozi walio wachache Alishikwa kwa masaa matatu Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo angalau sasa Bwana Spika, na alishikwa kwa sababu alikuwa akiandamana Bwana Spika, na ilikuwa ni kinyume na sheria Bwana Spika, na ilijulikana wazi ni kinyume na sheria Bwana Spika, na ni vizuri isemwe. Wambua anafurahia hata sasa naona akiniambia Senator Kenya endelea kuongea, lakini sitaongea mengi Bwana Spika, kwa sababu Bwana Spika, sasa wakati huu hata ijapokuwa nimesikia senator kutoka Mombasa akisema ya kwamba ati serikali itakula wanawake, lakini Bwana Spika anajua yeye mwenyewe